Good afternoon, or if you're joining us from the West Coast, good morning. Welcome to Academy on Air, a regular series from Google giving you tips, tricks, and insights to help you power your AdWords account. My name is Jill Saskin-Gales, and I'm an export consultant at Google Canada. Now, as my mother always says to me, what does an export consultant do? Good question. My job is to help advertisers grow their businesses outside of Canada. As part of my job, I need to sift through lots and lots of data every day and help my clients turn it into insights that they can use to power their businesses. And today, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Two of the most common tools I use to do that from Google are actually free and openly available for anyone to use. So that's what we're going to go over today. First, I'm going to walk you through how to use Google Trends. Google Trends allows us to tap into the database of intent. And what do we mean by the database of intent? That sounds like a very googly thing to say. Well, every day, or actually every second, millions of people are searching millions of searches on Google worldwide. So Google Trends allows us to look at all these searches, anonymized in aggregate, and understand, what's increasing in interest somewhere, what's decreasing in interest somewhere else, and how that compares across time and across geographies. So we'll look at Google Trends first, and then I'm going to show you Consumer Barometer, which is a platform that sits on top of thousands of surveys that Google conducted with consumers around the world to understand how they use the internet, how they shop, and how they consume video content. Put much more simply, Google Trends gives us category insights, and Consumer Barometer gives us audience insights. So without further ado, we're going to jump in with Google Trends. And if you have any questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to type them into your chat box and we'll address them at the end of our session today. All right, so if you were to go to trends.google.com, which you won't do right now because you're paying attention to me, you would see a page that looks like this. This is just a screenshot from a few days ago. And being Google, of course, search is a key component here. So at the top of the screen, you'll see a search bar. Today, we're going to use Google Trends to settle an age-old debate. Which species is better, cats or dogs? Serious stuff, I know. How are we going to measure that? Well, we're going to find out whether dogs or cats are more popular in Canada. So please go ahead, type into the chat box. Do you think dogs or cats are more popular in Canada? I'll keep going so we can find out. So in the search box at the top, you can type in dogs. And you'll notice there's dog search term followed by dog animal. What's the difference? Well, dog search term is any search that included the word dogs. What kind of dog should I get? What's the best hot dog? What are dog breeds, etc. Dog animal takes some of Google's intelligence to actually know what is related to a dog. So it would include dog, but it would also include puppy, and it would also include chien, pardon my French pronunciation. So today, we're going to go with dog animal. And you'll come upon a chart like this. We're going to narrow it down a bit further. So we don't want worldwide, we want Canada. So we click on worldwide, start typing Canada, and select Canada. You can select any country in the world. Then, for time period, we're going to select the last 12 months. This is usually a good place to start when we're just exploring. Lastly, we're going to add cat, animal. So last chance to vote. Which do you think would be more popular, dogs or cats? I'm looking over here and we seem pretty unanimous on dogs. Well, you guys are a smart bunch because dogs are in fact more popular, almost twice as popular as cats in Canada. So what are we actually looking at here? The blue line is search interest for dogs and the red line is search interest for cats. You'll notice I'm saying search interest, not searches, and that's an important distinction with Google Trends. This isn't just showing us the number of searches over time for dogs, because if we were to just look at number of searches, most things we looked at would always be increasing because there are more and more and more and more searches happening every day. So what we do instead is we take the number of searches for dogs in Canada and divide that by all searches in Canada. And then we do the same for cats. And by doing so, we look at the relative interest of something, not caring what's happening to search queries overall. So now we can say that interest in dogs is higher than interest in cats, and that interest has stayed pretty constant over the last 12 months. All right, so now that we've compared two different entities, we can keep scrolling down and look more into dogs. So here, since Canada has provinces, we can look by province, where is search interest highest. Remember, we're not saying that the Yukon Territory has the most searches for dogs. That really wouldn't make sense from a population basis. We're saying as a portion of all searches in the Yukon Territory, searches for dogs have a higher share there than they do in other provinces. And you can toggle to also look at that at a city level. If we were looking at the US instead of Canada, we would look at states instead of provinces. If you keep scrolling down in trends, you'll get to the last part, which shows the top and rising queries. Top queries are just the most popular. So not surprisingly, you see dog, dogs, chien. Makes sense. For related queries, under rising queries, you'll see the top rising query over the last 12 months, the one that gained in interest, was Snapchat dog filter. Not surprising to those of us who use Snapchat and like the flattering filter. So how do we use this? Well, this is a really good place to look for keyword ideas. If some of the top queries are related to your business and not in your account, you might want to add them. And conversely, if some of those rising queries are not related to your business, you might want to add them as negatives. So if I'm a veterinarian, I might want to add Snapchat as a negative to make sure I'm not showing ads against that. All right, next, we're going to compare different geographies. So instead of looking at dog versus cat, we're going to look at dog, 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 but then change the country for each. So again, I'm going to ask you to jump in with a guess. Where do you think dogs are most popular between the US, the UK, and Canada? Start typing your guess into the search box when I show you how to do this. So when you hover over one of those dogs, those three little dots will appear. If you click them and change filters, you can change what country we're looking at. So we're going to change one of those dogs to the UK, one to the US, and keep the other one at Canada. And let's see, keep bringing your guesses in so you can let me know where you think dogs are most popular, in Canada, the US, or the UK. I see some votes for UK over here. Is that what we think is going to win? The answer is the United States, but it's pretty close. So the blue line up there is searches for dog in the past 12 months in the US. The red line is Canada, and the yellow line is the UK. And I'll remind you once again, because I know it's easy for me to forget, that this isn't total searches. If it were, the US would be way higher than Canada. It's search interest. That's another reason that we normalize for all searches, so that we can compare different countries with different population sizes in a meaningful way. This can be a really helpful tool if you're working with a company who advertises in a lot of different countries, or maybe doesn't advertise but sells products or services in a lot of different countries, because you can see how interest in that brand or perhaps a competitor's brand compares across different countries. If you scroll down, again, you can see that regional, or if you choose city breakdown, and then some related queries. So apparently in the last year, people have been really concerned about whether dogs can eat fruit, such as strawberries, blueberries, avocado, or grapes. If you have a business that has the answer to those questions, there's an opportunity for you. You're welcome. All right, so we've looked at comparing topics, we've looked at comparing countries. The last thing we're going to do is compare time periods. So when we changed filters and selected different countries, this time we put them all back to Canada. We're comparing 2014, 2015, and 2016. And as you can see here, that interest has been slowly increasing each year. Now this is really interesting because of course we know all searches are increasing, but it's not just that. Searches for dogs as a portion of all searches in Canada are increasing bit by bit each year. Again, you can use this for your business to look up a brand name, a competitor, even a category. Maybe you work in the fashion business and you want to know with off-the-shoulder tops, what's been happening with those over time. You could look at this to see if that trend is rising or decreasing over time. The last note I'll leave you on with Google Trends is that, as we saw at the beginning, it's important what you type into that search box. I won't go into all this nitty-gritty here, but we'll send out this presentation to everyone who tuned into the live stream today. All right, so we just found out some interesting category insights about dogs and cats using Google Trends. Now we're going to flip over to get audience insights from Consumer Barometer. So at consumerbarometer.com, there are 4 different things you can go to. Here's what it would look like on a desktop. There's the graph builder, which we'll focus on today. And then there's also trended data, audience stories, and curated insights. Here, experts at Google have combed through the data and pulled out, insights for you. We're going to go to an intermediate level and pull out some of our own insights today with Graph Builder. So when you first click on it, a whole bunch of stuff comes up. We're going to start in the top left corner with filters. You can filter by country, by demographic, like gender or age, by internet usage. So we're going to start by looking at Canada, Mexico, and the US. And then we're going to filter by demographic for people aged 25 to 54. You'll notice there's a toggle there for average or compare. Average is going to put people in those age groups all together. If we wanted to compare age groups, we would keep them separate. But since I want to know for everyone 25 to 54, I'm going to use the average. Now back over to the questions. There's a bit of toggling back and forth to get to what we want. We're going to look under the Smart Shopper section, and specifically number of brands considered. So what are we looking at here? How many brands did people consider before product purchase in each of these countries? To make this a little bit more meaningful before we start analyzing, we're going to go back to filters. And now that we've selected a Smart Shopper question, we can select a Smart Shopper filter. So we're going to look at clothing and footwear, but there are about 20 different categories you can look at here. Now what's this showing us? For people whose most recent purchase was clothing or footwear, regardless of where they purchased it, who are between the ages of 25 and 54, how many different brands did they consider before they made their purchase? So the data says that in Canada and the US, about a third of people only considered one brand. That's the data. What's the insight? Well, that would tell me, if I'm a clothing or footwear brand, that brand awareness and brand strength is really important. If I want to succeed in Canada or the US, I need to have a really strong brand so people are aware of me and are coming right to me when they're ready to purchase clothing or footwear. Now you'll see that Mexico is lower and that people there are actually more likely to consider two brands or more brands if we were to keep scrolling down. What does that mean? Well, in Mexico, I would probably expect to see less direct traffic to my website since people are doing a lot more research beforehand as they consider multiple brands. I would also expect a lower conversion rate on my website since people aren't coming to my site and purchasing one and done. They're shopping around, comparing a lot of things. Even the time between first visit and purchase will probably be longer in Mexico. So it's good to be aware of something like that before entering a market, or if I'm trying to diagnose why performance in Mexico might not be as good as my performance in the US and Canada. As you can see, Consumer Barometer is really powerful. Lots of things to do. We're going to look at one more question today before I take your questions. So one of the first things I look at when I'm using Consumer Barometer is what we call the ROPO, which is research and purchase behavior. Basically, it's looking at how online and offline channels interact in the path to purchase, a very common question we're asked. And rather than just using the data here, I'm going to export as a CSV and paste it into Google Spreadsheets. I then delete the first two columns since they duplicate what's happening later here, and I make a bar chart that looks like this. Ta-da! Okay, so what is this telling me? So in Canada, for people 25 to 54 whose most recent purchase was clothing or footwear, did they research or purchase online or offline? The blue is online, so 9% of people in Canada both researched and purchased online. 16% researched online, but then purchased offline. 3% researched offline and then purchased online, what we might call showrooming. And then 73% did their entire purchase and research journey offline. And then you can see we have the same data for Mexico and the US. So again, what is this telling us that's useful? Well, one thing that stands out to me right away is that the US, about 1 in 5 people showroom, the yellow part, go offline to online. So if I'm a brand in the US, I want to make sure that people are looking in my store and that when they go to convert online, they're coming to me and not a competitor. So maybe I want to have a kiosk in store where they can send their shopping cart to their phone to purchase online, or have some kind of app where they can scan things to easily purchase online later. These are the kind of insights we can glean using Consumer Barometer. And of course, this has just been the tip of the iceberg. So what did we learn today? Google Trends lets you tap into the database of intent, finding out all kinds of insights across categories, across countries, or across time. or a combination thereof. And then Consumer Barometer gives us audience insights. It helps us understand how people use the internet, how they shop, and how they consume content around the world. I've included some links here to some other resources you might find useful as you're collecting data to turn into insights. If you have a question you want an answer to that's not covered with Google surveys, then that's not covered, my apologies, with Consumer Barometer, then you can go to Google surveys and run your own survey pretty cheaply and easily to get an answer to your question. Think with Google is a great resource for curated insights. I highly recommend you subscribe. I know I do. And then finally, Google Correlate and Public Data Explorer, some fun things to play with if you want a little bit more. At this time, I'm sure you have some questions, so we're going to take some of your questions. If you haven't asked a question yet and you want to, please type it into the chat box, and then we'll address as many as we can in the next few minutes. All right, let's see what some of your questions are. So I see one question here, is the data just from Google search or does it include partner sites, YouTube, etc.? Great question. So I believe that's in reference to Google Trends, and it includes all search products. It would also include images and maps, for example. There's a FAQ available at trends.google.com, which will show you exactly which Google website the data comes from. But yes, YouTube, images, those would be included in there, as well as Google search. Okay, how does this data compare with data from the Keyword Planner in terms of CPC bids? So Google Trends won't actually show you CPC bids. It's just showing you terms and categories and what's happening over time. If you find search terms there and you want to then find out, what the average CPC would be, that's when you could plug those terms into Keyword Planner. And just as we saw on Consumer Barometer, Google Trends also lets you export to CSV to make it really easy to pop that into Keyword Planner for you. All right, another question we have here, how often is Google Trends refreshed with data? Great question. One of my favorite things about using Google Trends rather than some of our own internal tools is that it's refreshed weekly. So it's very, very up to the date. It's the easiest way to find out not just what was going on over the last year, but what was going on last week. Let's see, if you have other questions, you can bring them in now. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to be here with you. I hope you have fun using Google Trends and Consumer Barometer, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.